People need to be a lot more careful with the implications of the ideas that they idiotically promote. It is common, for example, for a follower of a tribalistic ideology such as nationalism to advocate oppression and exploitation whenever it is in their interests. This selfish idea is the basis of nationalism. If we can get away with doing evil things when doing so is beneficial for us, then why would we not do those evil things? This is the idea that underlies hypernationalism. Do you really think that you want to promote this idea? Do you really want to live in a society where people think screwing each other over is fine so long as it benefits them? Of course not. Well, this is simply the logical conclusion of the selfishness that necessarily underlies the nationalism. The underlying ideas of the politics some people promote on a large scale can have very harmful outcomes when they are logically and consistently applied on the macro scale. If you want to justify oppression and exploitation while being somewhat consistent, you are probably going to end up justifying your own oppression and exploitation. You cannot justify the slavery of another without justifying the enslavement of yourself. There is always someone who can screw you over and exploit and oppress you, and if you promote the idea that they should, then why would they not? This is the problem that underlies ideas behind many selfish, nationalistic worldviews. They ignore the effects of the underlying ideas of their own ideology. Because when you justify the oppression and exploitation, you don't get to justify them only when it suits you. You must justify them consistently, and this ends with you morally justifying your own oppression and exploitation. Our societies rely on a reciprocal moral system. Don't do to others what you wouldn't want done to you. This is the most basic of moral lessons. It is closely tied to Christianity's golden rule and has similarities with the Eastern idea of karma. This basic moral idea is widespread and necessary as an underpinning of any half-decent society. There will always be cases where people break this moral rule, but that does not make it useless. There are situations where people break literally every law that exists, and that does not mean we get rid of all laws. This is a basic moral idea that is of great value, and we should try to enforce it in politics. Ideologies such as nationalism ignore this idea, and will logically lead to a war of all against all, as everyone tries to pursue their own interests to the detriment of everyone else. This is the logical conclusion of nationalism. The implications of this ideology are both irrational and immoral. Nationalism is an ideology of selfishness. The only thing is that selfishness, for whatever reason, arbitrarily and incoherently, stops at a meaningless line at the in-group. There is no reason it should not go further to the individual level. The logical implication is that it does go to the individual level. This clashes with the most basic moral ideas of universal well-being. Just ask yourself, what society would you rather live in? A society of people who think that they can do whatever immoral thing they want, so long as it is good for them and they can get away with it? Or a society where people look out for each other's interests and in return have their interests looked out for? I know what one I want to move towards. Ideally, the one that does not easily justify my own slavery and genocide, if only someone can get away with it and profit off of it. When you justify the slavery of someone else, you justify your own enslavement. Ideologies such as nationalism are for people who have not considered the implication of their views upon the entirety of the society. Nationalism is inherently incoherent, as it draws the line for acceptable selfishness arbitrarily at the in-group. Due to idiocy, ignorance, or malice, they have come to a conclusion that is equally immoral and incoherent. In trying to find a way to find an identity, they have embraced selfishness in the most comical and inconsistent of ways. Such people should be encouraged to engage in introspection so they can perhaps reconsider their foolish views. No person of sound mind would embrace an ideology which has at its core an easy moral justification of their own destruction and the destruction of everyone and everything that they value, if only someone can profit off of it, which they can. This ideology is inconsistent, incoherent, immoral, and a complete joke.